Salam dostlar. Sizləri Live Life in Kaliforniya səhifəsində xoş gördüm. Sizlərlə mən Samir, Kaliforniyadan yenidən sizi salamlayıram. Bugünkü qonağımız maraqlı bir insan, Amerikalı. Amerikada doğulmuş, boya başa çatmış və Azərbaycan cəmiyyətinə hər zaman dəstək olan, Azərbaycan həqiqətlərini hər zaman yayan və Kaliforniyada bizim cəmiyyətlə yaxından əməkdaşlıq edən icmalarımızın bütün tədbirlərində iştirak edir. İndi özünə söz verəcəm. Bugünkü yayınımız ingiliscə olacaq. Çünki bizim üçün bu vacibdir. Yerli Amerikalıların Azərbaycan olan münasibəti, ermənilərin Los Angeles hadisələri zamanı erməni milliyyətçilərinin və orada olan o bəzi erməni qruplaşmalarının Azərbaycanlıların üzərinə hücum etməsi barədə danışacağıq və Csukás bizimlədir. Dear John, I welcome you. And I'm very happy to have you in my live stream today. Thank you for accepting my invitation. So I just introduced you and also just gave a note about today's live stream to our audience. So I would like you to have a speech now and introduce yourself, and then we just go from there, proceed and start our conversation. Please.
Oh, right on. Yeah. So my name's John Csukás. I'm a Hungarian American. My parents escaped communism from Hungary in 1980 via Turkey, came to the United States. I have a lot of good friends in the Azerbaijani community, and I had studied history with the emphasis on Middle East, South Asia studies, and in particular the Turkish world. And I am very cognizant of the issues facing the geopolitics of Eurasia, or Western Eurasia, and what is happening in Azerbaijan vis-a-vis Moscow or Armenia today. And in that light, I wanted to share my thoughts or my opinions or what the facts are on the ground there, as per your invitation.
Thank you, John. And I would like just give information about our topic, today's topic, that our topic is the origins of modern Armenian aggression. And John, you know that the last mob attack in Los Angeles, which had happened a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles, when the Armenian, more than 6,000 Armenians protested in front of the Azerbaijan consulate. And during that protest, few Azerbaijani guys, 50 or 60 person, they have been there to have an anti-protest. But at the end, you know what has happened, and they started to attack and they started to beat and fist fighting against our guys, and 7 injured, and 2 of them have been in intensive care for more than 48 hours. So really it happened, that's a brutal attack, and that's a violence, that's really criminal, which now the LAPD started investigation. But the last things what was going on in Los Angeles in top hierarchy is not for the favor of Azerbaijanis. You know that the Los Angeles mayor and also the vice governor and LAPD chief, they started to talk about just taking the Armenian side, and that's why our people happened there. And it happened because of Azerbaijani guys, they throw some hammers and some stones, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. So that's, that all of this stuff.
Like frozen water bottles. And
that's bullshit they are talking. But anyway, it means that we don't have sufficient resources of media and sufficient resources of support from the California senators or representatives, which they represent in the Congress, you know, all this stuff. So I want to just ask you a question. What's your opinion in this case? How do you know, and how you can tell, in your view, in your opinion, how it happened, and what's your reaction to this accidents, or excuse me, this brutal attacks?
Well, speaking of the response from the mayor of Los Angeles, or the LAPD police chief, or other politicians in California, like the lieutenant governor, I believe you mentioned, the vice governor, you call him. These are really, their responses are really based on electoral concerns, because there are a certain number of Armenians in, say, Los Angeles or Fresno here in California and parts of California. They really only hear one side of the story. They don't know about the greater geopolitical context, or even our national interest of the United States in the Caucasus region or Central Asia, and in promoting energy security away from, say, Moscow or Tehran. Our local politicians in California don't understand that, or they're more worried about electability and placating organized Armenian political pressure groups. So their response and basically quasi-support of this kind of thuggery or criminal actions, assaults and batteries that occurred in Los Angeles a few weeks ago, it just really comes from either a misinformation or their own best interests for being reelected or securing the vote of an Armenian lobby. You see this similarly in France too, for example, where there are over 500,000 registered voters of Armenian descent in places like Lyon and Paris and the other big cities. You know, all politics are local, and Armenians here in America and elsewhere are very good at manipulating a situation in their favor, regardless if they are the aggressors, which in the recent border incursion far and away from the Nagorno-Karabakh region, you see that essentially happening. They somehow are the aggressor, but are able to make it appear that they are the victims.
Thank you, John. And as for information, this in mid-July, Armenian armed forces, they started to attack in neighboring from Tavuz region in Azerbaijan, and they started shelling and bombing our village and military units, which escalated there, and they killed 13 people. 12 of them are military men, and 2 of them of military men are hierarchy persons, like colonel and general mayor.
Major general.
Yeah, major generals is, thank you, and 1 civilian. But after that, still some fighting over the in that area. So in Tavuz, and still I read the news, and every day they starting to shoot and bombing again. It's not stop. But you have some. I know that you researched the history of this conflict, and you know how it happened. What's your personal opinion, and what you researched actually about this conflict?
Sure. Well, the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan is really falls into a larger geopolitical trend of a conflict between the West and Russia. That is to say, Washington, D.C. and Brussels and Moscow. And what we see here is essentially the Euro-Atlantic world, the world that created NATO and free market capitalism and the European Union, basically. That is essentially, that kind of political thinking and political sphere is expanding, and it has been expanding since the fall of the Berlin Wall. So the so-called Guam nations, which the U.S. State Department and many political theorists refer to as the Guam nations, are Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, and Moldova. These are the countries that are basically slated for NATO and European integration into basically the Euro-Atlantic political economic sphere, essentially the Western civilization away from Moscow or Russia, which in fact is, Russia is not entirely not a part of this, but the leadership in Moscow is not necessarily subscribing to the ideas of Europe or America. So ergo, you have dualities, polarities, right? So within this struggle, you see in Moldova, there's a Transnistria, self-declared Russian-supported hamlet or enclave or side of a river, basically, like a shore of a river. You see this in the Donbass region in Ukraine, where political enlightenment led to revolutions in Ukraine in 2013-14 and the subsequent Russian invasion of Crimea, and the support of Donbass rebels and overt Russian support into the so-called Nova Rossiya that the separatists are calling. And you see this also in Georgia in like 2008, where under the guise of the Olympics, the Beijing Olympics of 2008, there was an invasion and sequestration of Georgian land in Abkhazia and South Ossetia away from Tbilisi. So it's in the same general vein of a historical trend or geopolitical struggle that which Karabakh falls under. And that is basically Armenia and Karabakh are anchors for the Russian geopolitical ship of Eurasia. So without their overt support of of Armenia against Azerbaijan, Russia is constricted in the world. So Russia's link to the Persian Gulf and Iran, not just over the Caspian Sea, but over land, essentially goes through Armenia. And it's within this struggle that Azerbaijani civilians are the unfortunate victims of a geopolitical game between Moscow and Washington.
Okay, so I was born in western part of Azerbaijan, now called Armenia. My ancestors, my grandpas, my grandmas, they were always lived there, and during the starting like at the beginning of the last century, like in the 90s, always Armenians, when they came and just moved to these lands by the Russians in 18th, like in 19th century, they always get a support from Russia. They always get a support from different countries they have interests against the Turkish nations over there. And starting from 90s, 1905, 1918 to 1920, and even this during the Soviet period in 1940s, when the Stalin era, also there when the Soviet collapsed, like in 1990s, during whole century, Armenian vandalism and terrorism have been in our lands. They killed so many innocent people, not the soldiers, innocent people, children, old people. And you know what has happened in Khojaly? That's a really massacre. That's a really massacre. And now the Armenian always just trying to talk everywhere about their genocide, which happened. They say that allegedly, yeah, they said it happened, but it's not the exact and true information.
Well, let me stop you right there really quick, because no competent court of international jurisdiction has found that. So to call the nation or a society or a military group has committed genocide, it needs the finding of a court. And that has never happened in the case of the Armenians or many other people. The most famous example of that is the Jewish Holocaust in Europe, where there was a finding of genocide at the Nuremberg trials. There has never been anything remotely similar to that, to the Armenian example.
And unfortunately, not all the world knows this that they understand. The information was that that's a false information, and always they meet with the especially in the big countries like strong countries like US and Western countries, whenever they found the influential people, and they start to talk to them, to support to them, and by financially or just giving the vote, like their voices in voting. So, but they asked the people, even in California, they've spread the news that genocide happened, but it never happened. In jurisdiction, they didn't just approve it, actually. Never had any court order about it. So, but they talk about it everywhere. But nobody talk about the Khojaly massacre, genocide.
Right.
Unfortunately, you are as an American citizen, and you researched, and you have some ties, and you are our friends. But did you ever talk to your American friends about this problem, or just how do you think that how we can just spread or just talk to the people or find a way to deliver our realities, like how genocide happened, how the Armenians really brutally attacked and they occupied our lands. 20% of our lands now under occupation of Armenian and Russian troops, and more than 1 million became refugees. They left their centuries homelands, and over 30,000 people killed during the war, 1991 and 1994. And how do you think that what we need to have, or how we should capable to deliver our realities, our truths to American societies, American communities? What we need for it?
Well, first and foremost, I believe that coalition building is very important. Reaching out to other communities, the Spanish-speaking community, various other ethnic groups and organized communities, to having information sessions, letting them know that that Khojaly happened, how it happened, the extreme brutality visited upon a civilian population, and that was really a part of a organized ethnic cleansing campaign. You see this in Bosnia by Serb and Croatian forces trying to depopulate the areas of the other ethnicities and religious groups for their own nationalist projects. And you see this also in Azerbaijan happening, because essentially the Karabakh War was a war in which Russia's proxy, Armenia, wasn't really doing a lot of fighting. They were doing a lot of massacring, a lot of armed tourism, but the actual fighting themselves were more of Russian veterans or Armenian irregular troops, not even Armenian Soviet troops or the troops of the Armenian Soviet Republic, now independent or then independent Armenia. You see essentially Armenian Americans even. For example, one of the founders of the terrorist group Asala, Monty Malconian, is from Visalia, California, here a small town in Central California, in the farmlands of the Central Valley. And this is an Armenian American born in America, but somehow fights and dies in Karabakh for Armenian ultranationalist, fascistic objectives. So what you see essentially is that these facts need to be brought to light. I believe the Azerbaijani community needs to reach out to our friends in both the Muslim and the Jewish communities and show them how our suffering or history, recent political history and history of genocide is similar to, for example, the French experience in Algeria, where about 10% of the population was wiped out, upwards of maybe 1.8 million people. And France is still very loud about supporting Armenian claims, but doesn't even look in its own backyard to see what they have done to Algeria or to other nations in Africa. Similarly, you see the Jewish Holocaust perpetrated by the Nazi regime in Germany. So there's a lot of synonymous kind of fanaticism between Nazi Germany and modern Armenia, vis-a-vis ethnic cleansing. For example, just to put it out there, in Armenia today, there is no Azerbaijani or Turkish or Muslim community. In Baku or Azerbaijan, there still is a Armenian community. In neighboring Turkey, there's an Armenian community, a vibrant Armenian community. So what does this say about Armenia and the society that is there? And I think, pushing on these facts and letting people know is really the key to getting the Azerbaijani side of the story in front of people. I think that's very important. And the people need to vote. I mean, it's very simple. People need to register to vote. They need to become constitutionally literate, what their rights are, what they're voting for. The narrative of the community needs to be at the forefront of politicians who need to, want to be elected or whatever. So currently you have in the United States and places like California or Massachusetts, where you have a very vocal Armenian pressure groups, and they're the only ones talking. If they're the only ones talking, that's the only story, the only reality that our politicians get. So I think educating our legislators and our executives and even pursuing things in the judicial branch, bringing suit against basically civil suits and criminal suits against Armenian criminals who perpetrated acts of terror, of assault, battery, murder, mutilation of people, theft of property from the Karabakh War. There's many of these Armenians. They live here in California and elsewhere in the United States who have blood on their hands for what happened in Azerbaijan 20 plus years ago. So I think these are all important chapters or objectives that the community could engage in.
Thank you, John. And I want to just take a chance to talk about the false information which went through all the news last weeks about the graffiti vandalism, like Armenians wanted to show to the whole California that the Azerbaijani people vandalized the Armenian school, like so-called KZV in San Francisco, Armenian school, on the walls. If you've seen this scenario, have you had to watch it? Yeah, all the news like Fox News and blah, blah, blah. So they started to talk about that Armenians talking that, oh, it's Azerbaijani people, and they started to pressure us, and they show us that they can kill us, or even they can attack our schools and our children, or we scare or something. Do you think that it happened by Azerbaijanis?
I highly doubt that, because where the school is located, in like the approximately Lake Merced neighborhood of San Francisco, which I am familiar, there are a lot of churches and organizations out there, larger properties. It was cheaper at one time. I guess it was cheaper to buy land out there and build. It's highly inaccurate to say that, or to assume that this was Azerbaijanis, because not just the area where it's located, the fact that there was misspellings in the so-called graffiti. You see misspellings of the name Azerbaijan and Hojali. Just not just simple misspellings, but like pretty significant misspellings. If I'm not mistaken, the J in Hojali was like written as a G, so it was like Hogali. Azerbaijan was written with like an I. I mean, it was like I saw it. I was like, I've never seen that spelling before. I mean, I'm sure the internet and whatnot has all these, this information on there. But it was really, from my understanding, the Azerbaijani community, people would not respond in such a way to whatever is happening in the Caucasus and in the conflict there. Azerbaijanis are not the kind of people to vandalize a school. That is something that a group of criminals or thugs would do. Or I suggest that perhaps the Armenians themselves did it. The district attorney of San Francisco should do an independent investigation of what happened there, and to check the security footage. Because what I've heard in the news is that apparently there is surveillance footage. So it would be really nice to see, who is at the heart of this crime. It's vandalism. It is a crime, but the question is who created it, who committed this, either the conspiracy to commit the crime or make the crime. But I mean, that being said, no community's property should be vandalized. It shouldn't be the Armenians or Azerbaijanis or Jewish, Muslim, whoever. That's just very anti-democratic, un-American, un-Azerbaijani also to do such a thing. And that's something that the Azerbaijani community here locally actually came out against. So I think that needs to be the record needs to bear that happened. That people were not going to simply support vandalism of a school, you know.
Of course, the investigation started, and I believe that I also just tweeted under the person who just tweeted that, oh, we're gonna just investigate. I think he was one of the competent person in SF City office. So I tweeted also I just retweeted him that of course you have to be very carefully investigate this process and publicly tell the people the results, not to have any hidden side of this process, because the surveillance cameras should be in all the schools in California. I think this is by law, and we want to just see watch all the video footage, and that's the main thing which you have to react. Because I'm Azerbaijani, and I know that our people never can hurt or never can kill or do vandalize like actions in any schools or kindergartens. It's not in our character. We never do it. So that's why I think it's a really big lie. And the other thing is like what I mentioned during this process last week, the media in California and the United States, it seemed that they're really under big influence of Armenian organizations, because all of them just writing the articles blaming Azerbaijani communities, Azerbaijanis. What do you think about it? Like American, is it, what is the justice here? What is it the line of the justice? Media should be independent and they should investigate it. You know what? They shouldn't stand with Armenian only. They have to investigate, they have to research. If you want to be really find the justice or be on the peaceful side, you have to investigate. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that the Armenian community in America has been here since at least the 1880s. So they are very adept at getting their story out. They are very well organized. And, you know, there's a saying in English that the squeaky wheel gets the oil or the grease. So basically those who demand justice get justice. But in the absence of objective view, or there is not a counterweight, or you know, if evidence and facts are not speaking, one side can manipulate the situation. I think that's what's happening in the United States and France and other places, in Russia even, that there is a very vocal Armenian group or community which dominates the narrative, or tends to dominate the narrative, or aims to dominate the narrative, because they have this understanding of the first in time, first in right, kind of I'm here first, my story first. Never mind what the Azerbaijanis are saying. They're not even human. We are, well, you know, we're just innocent victims. Never mind what they're saying. That's essentially what the Armenians are doing, and all these news editors and journalists who are subscribing to Armenian narratives simply are misinformed or not cognizant of that part of the world. They don't know what's going on in the Caucasus. They are not familiar with that area aside from the Armenian narrative, and that's where the Azerbaijani community or the wider Turkish community needs to flex its electoral muscle and its public relations arm, because facts should not be politicized. Facts speak for themselves, and it's objective, you know, empirical analysis. You know, if something is blue, it's not green. You know, you know. So yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that is the real issue in America, and in many other societies, is that one group dominates or tends to dominate the media.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate your speech, and also to our community, Azerbaijani community. We know that not all the Americans are standing with the Armenian side. So this conflict needs really to be very sensitive, to be very sensitive to the problem, and not knowing the deep of this conflict or root of the conflict, and not knowing the fact, having the facts in your hand, talking like blah, blah, blah. And really, we appreciate your help. Always, you have been with us and stand with us and always visited our community center and our events and had a good speech. And you always try to help us to reach some local authorities, and we really appreciate it. And thank you so much. And if you have your like closing speech, and you can just make, and yeah, please, thanks.
Well, thank you, Samir, for inviting me. I believe that the community, the Azerbaijani community, would benefit from more organization, more PR, more involvement in the civic life of the countries in which they live, whether it's here in America or Canada or elsewhere, to really, to offer a different perspective and just to present the facts of what the reality is between Armenia and Azerbaijan and the military conflict there. I think that can't be stressed enough. That in the absence of that, you have the media dominated by one side, and that's not healthy for democracy or for our decision makers. Because if the media is dominated on one side, inevitably the legislatures are also going to side with what the media tells them. So regardless of what's happening on the ground. So I think it's very important for Azerbaijanis to vote, to be involved in the political process, to be constitutionally literate, and to be able to articulate themselves and enjoy the same fruits of liberty that the Armenians have been enjoying for over a century. I think that's very important, and now in the present conflict needs to be pursued even more aggressively.
Thank you, John, being with us. Now I'm just switching to my language. Çox sağ olun, dəyərli dostlar, bizi izlədiyiniz üçün. Bugün bizim məqsədimiz yerli Amerikalıların fikirlərini öyrənmək və onların bizi dəstəkləyən insanları ilə burada söhbətlər təşkil etməkdir. Çünki heç də bildiyiniz kimi bütün Amerikalılar elə erməni yalanlarına uymurlar. Görürsünüz ki, Csukás kimi bizim dostlarımız var. Biz vaxtaşı mən digər Amerikalı dostlarımızı da dəvət eləyəcəm və onlar da razıdırlar ki, çıxıb Azərbaycan reallıqlarını bildikləri üçün bizi dəstəklədiklərini nümayiş etdirsinlər. Yəni ki, onlar da bundan çəkinmirlər. Heç də erməni yalanlarına uymurlar. Özləri Amerikalılar birisi çox ayıq millətdir və onlar araşdırma etməyi sevirlər və məsələyə dərindən baxmağı bilirlər. Təbii ki, hər insan eyni deyil, amma Amerikalıların əksəriyyəti özləri münasibət bir şeylərindən öyrənməyi və münasibət göstərməyi bilirlər. We have one question here, really very quick, and if you have time, sorry. Aras basically, is the conflict between Azerbaijani and Armenian people interesting to American people?
I would say, frankly, no. They don't even know that. Never mind the conflict; they probably don't even know where these countries are. You have to see the reality. And in the United States, almost no school district anywhere teaches geography. There's the very condensed, very short version of history that is taught in high schools, and I don't think the Caucasus or Armenia or Azerbaijan ever come up. And if it does, if the area does, it's usually from Armenian pressure groups talk about their side of events, and they'll get a paragraph or two in a book. That's pretty much the extent. Now, that being said, the American people might not know about Armenia and Azerbaijan so much, but the American establishment, for example, our career politicians or the State Department are intimately aware of what's going on. And the career politicians are focusing on their electorate. Who will get them into office? Other than that, I would say the American people are not very interested in this conflict, even though it does affect them and it affects the entire Western world for the energy security of the region and access to Central Asia and the so-called Ganja Gap controversy, which is going on now.
Yeah, I believe so, that American people is not so interested in our conflict because lack of information, and our communities needs to work with the American counterparts, American people, very closely, very tight, and just give them whole information, and always to organize some events, engaging them, involving some American neighborhood whenever we live. So again, thank you, John, and
My pleasure.
have a good day to you.
Likewise.
Dostlar, təşəkkür edirəm sizlərə də. Vaxtınızı ayırdınız, bizi dinlədiniz və bizim digər görüşlərimizi izləməyə davam edin. Sabah bizimlə Böyük Britaniyadan Günel müsahibə olacaqdır. Gənc fəal və Britaniyada protestlərdə iştirak etmişdi. Protestlərin fəal iştirakçısı olmuşdur. Sabah da bizi maraqlı görüş gözləyir. Sağ olun, hələlik. Okay, John, bye. Take care.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.